Hi, all. Welcome to yet another series of Coot. And here we discuss SaaS adoption trends with industry leaders and enterprise leaders. Today, we have among with us Mr. Pankaj Rai, who is the Group CDO at Aditya Birla. Pankaj is fondly known as Human LinkedIn among his well wishers. He's mentored to so many people, including myself. And Pankaj is day in day out evaluating a lot of SaaS tools. So if you are in the journey of going through the enterprise sales, then this podcast is must watch. Let's welcome Pankaj. Thank you so much, Pankaj, for joining us here. Very warm welcome. Happy to have you here. Could we start with a brief introduction about yourself and your current role in Aditya Birla?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me here. I've been doing a lot of these podcasts and other sessions, but mostly on Zoom
Sure.
or in other ways. So this is the first time I'm in a studio.
Oh,
So it looks good. This is a new experience for me. So thanks for inviting me here. Um,
pleasure is
my,
mine.
yeah, so my background, as you can see the gray hair on my head, I've been working for a few decades. And all of us at that point in time used to be engineers, and some of us chose to be MBAs, which is what I did. I started off in management consulting, then went
Sure.
into banking with ICICI and GE Capital and Standard Chartered Bank. And then I've been now in Bangalore for last 20 odd years, and
Sure.
largely in the data field,
Hmm.
because when I was in Dell, I got into data analytics back in 2007.
Hmm.
From there on, I went into Wells Fargo and now with the Aditya Birla Group. So sort of associated with the field of data for the last, 15, 18 odd years and so forth.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
job in Aditya Birla is really a central COE or a corporate function.
Sure.
Our team's efforts are to create a data culture in the larger Aditya Birla organization, where we have several group companies,
Sure.
and we are more of an enabling function. We were formed about 7, 8 years ago, pre-COVID. Me and a lot of my team members are now, 3 or 4 years old. Some of the initial people who joined in, COVID happened, and many of them left. So so that's where we are today.
Great, great, Pankaj. So as you mentioned, you're in the center of excellence and you're the group CDO. So I understand, you're serving across the horizontal, right? And so whenever, there is a tech requirement, whenever there's a SaaS requirement from your team, what is your initial approach? Do you ask your team members to kind of, experiment this, do it internally? You guide them to develop it somehow internally? Or when there is a, bandwidth issue, you tell them that, go and get it from the market. So how is the approach initially, Pankaj?
So if you don't mind, let me give you a slightly longer answer of
Definitely.
what we have learned, how we approach, and what
Hmm.
our current thinking about this topic is.
Yeah.
Because it is, I mean, you have heard this term enough that it's not about the technology, it's about the business impact.
Business. Yeah.
So when we were set up, our team would, because we have various corporate functions.
Hmm.
IT is another corporate function, and so are we. So a lot of people had difficulty in comprehending what does IT and analytics or data, why are they separate and what does it mean, and so on and so forth. So the
Sure.
first question we had to answer, and we continue to answer with our stakeholders, is to say, what's the distinction between the IT function and the analytics function? Very fair question,
Fair.
because there
Yeah.
are two COEs. That COE has been there far longer, because
Hmm.
IT has been a corporate
Hmm.
function for a long while. Analytics was such set up much later.
Hmm.
So I think the way we are describing, and my colleague who leads IT, we kind of talk to each other and say, how do we explain this to people so that
Hmm.
people have a good understanding of what we all do and how do
Hmm.
we collaborate and so forth. So the answer to that question that we have come up with, we are saying, in any company, you'll have IT systems, operational systems which capture data. You have the SAPs, you have CRM, and many such systems.
Hmm.
So those are the various IT systems. Then you have the infrastructure, which is the cloud and server and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So the infrastructure layer and the application layer,
Sure.
those are two which are mostly the IT team's
Very well.
goal, which
Hmm.
they have always done.
Hmm.
I think so. So those two layers, the infra and the app layer, is what
Hmm.
the IT team has been primarily responsible for. I think what has happened more recently is a lot of data has started to come in.
Exactly.
So more specialized skills are required to harness the power of data to take
Hmm.
better decisions.
Hmm.
So the next two layers is what the analytics team sort of takes care of. So
Hmm.
those capabilities really are, so just like you had infrastructure and app as the two capabilities in the IT layer,
Hmm.
here the capability is the data management, the data lake. How do you capture data? Where do you store it? How do you make sure data is governed? How do you make sure
How
it's
is
correct? So that's the
workload?
whole data engineering and the data management layer. And then on top of it is the data science layer or the analytics layer, to say, how do you make sense of it for the business. So you want to make the logistics people take better decisions, or the marketing people take better decisions, or the energy management people take better decisions. So net we are looking at it as a stack with 4 layers. Infra and application, which is the core for the IT teams, and then data management and the data analysis is the core for the the analytics team. Now I think everyone should know all, but someone will be more experienced in one or the other, because they all have to work together. You can't say that I just know one and I don't know the other. So we encourage everyone to know all the layers, although you may have a specialization or a deeper skill in one of these 4. So that's how these things stack up. Now, if you think about our role, it is closer to the business to enable them to take better decisions. So the goal of our CEO is to say, we will create a data culture, which means you can take better decisions on a day-to-day basis, right? So therefore, if the logistics people can take a better decision on how to organize their logistics, marketing people can take better decision on how to organize their marketing spend, the energy people can take better decision on how to optimize their energy spend, procurement people, right? To think of various businesses and functions who are taking decisions related to whatever their business need is, right? So that's the goal that we are saying, how do we help you take better decisions? And therefore what we did was, we did a reflection on our own team, what we have been doing last 3 years, and how do we want to approach the future. So last 3 years since I have been there, and many of the team members have been there, our teams have been going to business and say, you know what, I can help you optimize your logistics. So you give me the rate, I will work with you, optimize. Okay, this thing that we have done can be used by others also. We'll go to you, we can help you do better sales targeting or better customer service. If done one place, we can do it elsewhere, because we are a large group. So we think that if we can do it in one place, then you can also replicate it elsewhere. So that's what we do. So try out things, create some IP, which can then be reused by others. So we believe that a central team's main role would be to create IP of new ideas, new things, which once done here can be done elsewhere.
Replicated to the different verticals.
Absolutely.
Like Hindalco
and And therefore, now the approach that we have come up with, because what we do is, when we do it, we then give it to them to run. So we do a BOT, that while we have done it for you, I think now you have to run it on a day-to-day basis. So we have looked at ourselves as a central, more like a innovation team or an R&D team, which does new things, and then the factory sort of goes into production. So think of us as an R&D team and the business as the factory. So the change the business happens here, run the business happens there. So we transfer the thing to them, and therefore they need to have the talent to manage it. They need to have the funding to continue to support it. They need to also sometimes take over the relationships with our vendors or our startup partners, because many of these solutions are not just our own. We bring a bunch of people to do that. And over time, we have also tried to figure out how to make sure that the problems that we work on are innovative, scalable, and aligned to the strategy of the business. So net today, our common language of driving AI-led transformation is sort of a 3-layered framework that we have now distilled based on our own learning, to say, how do we operationalize data culture? Because the goal is, you as a COE, create data culture, nice vision statement. When you have to operationalize it, now there is a framework to say, and we call it the 3W framework. Ways of thinking, ways of working, and ways of doing. Now the doing part is well understood. Everyone knows it and everyone focuses on it. So for us, doing meaning data science, data engineering, and data architecture. These are the capabilities our team members have that. So we have been focusing a lot on this here, doing things. Now we realize if we have to create a culture, we have to develop the other 2 layers also, so that it scales and sustains, because you can't do it just one time. It has to scale and it has to sustain over time. So that's the intent. So the other 2 layers which we have now sort of reflected and come up with are in the middle, which is the ways of working layer, has talent, funding, ecosystem partnership, and adoption. So talent mean that, what type of people should you have, what kind of training should your people have, what type of org design you should have. So those types of things we get involved in helping the businesses to do the talent part, because unless they have the right talent, they can't take it over and run it. On funding, how do you decide what to buy, how to buy, how much to pay, some of those things, what is the ROI of this initiative? So those types of topics get covered here. Ecosystem is, how do you evaluate a vendor, how do you take a startup partner, and how do you work with that? So there are things over there. Adoption is, how do you do design thinking, how do you make sure that these things are sustained and they are not right. And then the ways of thinking layer is really trying all this to the strategy. So the projects that we should work on should be tied to strategy. They shouldn't be like, we should be just doing something because someone said so. So the top 3 boxes on the ways of thinking layer is strategy, governance, and AI maturity. So strategy box really means that if you have to work on projects, it should be derived from strategy. So the action over there for our team is to do a workshop with the business team to say, what's your business strategy? How do we conduct workshops? We look at annual reports, we look at analyst reports, we talk to the strategy team, we talk to our M&A team. We try to form a point of view about what is critical to that business. And then we go to the business people, talk to them, understand from them, and together come up with a set of projects which we think are innovative and transformative, which can help those business. And out of them, the most critical one we will take upon ourselves because we have to experiment. And some others, they'll also do. So at the end of the workshop, there can be many projects. The innovative ones or the risky ones we'll take up. The simpler one we'll say you can do it. It's anyway, So we take on the risk rather than let them take the risk. And things when done can be transported. And governance is all about just maintaining it. AI maturity is all about measuring all the other things to say how are we doing. So net, if you think about this 3W framework, it is a common language across group companies which are very diverse, from metals to cement to retail to paints and all of that. So it's almost like saying that, when I was a Six Sigma guy back in GE, we used to have a common framework for continuous improvement called DMAIC for Six Sigma, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So the way we have framed it, what is the DMAIC equivalent for ABG, and what is the language that all group companies can use? All of them can also learn from each other. So if you look at this 10-box framework of strategy, governance, AI maturity, people, funding, ecosystem adoption, data science, data engineering, data architecture, all these 10 boxes, we are creating reusable components that anyone else can use. The reusable component in the bottom layer is really a piece of code, but the reusable component in the top layers, those 7 boxes, are frameworks and examples from other places. So let's say Hindalco company has a program to say, we will send a dozen people from various factories for a 6-month internship to learn data science so that they can go back and implement and run. Now, this is a reusable component that anyone else can use. Similarly, in the cement company, there's a unique way of looking at funding. They're saying, this is a topic on which we want to invest 100 rupees. We think that we'll do 10 initiatives. 6-7 of them may fail, but 3 will succeed. So our funding mechanism is almost like a VC. That some will succeed, but we'll measure at a portfolio level, not at a project level. So I think we are figuring out together and inventing ways of thinking about all of these topics in our group companies, and once done in one place, transfer that idea to others. So if someone can do this VC type approach to experimentation in one company, why can't everyone else do? Similarly, if someone can do a talent program in one company, why can't everyone else do? Similarly, for all the other topics about how do you do the strategy workshop, how do you do the governance and all that. So net, we are trying to develop all these 10 muscles for all the group companies, and frankly, utilizing the same framework for developing our team members as well. So we look at these 10 muscles as a full stack human being for an individual and full stack for a team. And we believe that transformation is not really a technical problem. And the software and technology is a good thing. But unless we are aligned to strategy and unless we have developed a way to scale and sustain, this remains incomplete. So that's the sort of big picture. So when you ask the question about how do we take technology decisions, I think we start thinking about it from an overall business decision and within that a technology decision. So many a times if someone says, I need to buy XYZ, we would go back and say, why do you want to buy that? What are you trying to think about? So we look at the strategy, what are their approaches? And many times we will say, oh, for this, you actually don't need to buy anything. There are things which are already available that others are using. With some modification, you can use it yourself. So we are creating a library or a pool of reusable components, whether software or otherwise, which others can use. And we believe a lot more in this open source sharing mechanism rather than buying too much of packaged software and getting tied into it. So that's the general philosophy and the thinking that we are having.
Sure, Pankaj. So I want to take a step back, Pankaj. You mentioned that you're doing this along with the startup ecosystem also, the SaaS. So like wherever you're going and your team, let's say your data engineering team or the architect team is going and evaluating some component which needs to be added on to your existing thing. Now, are there any guidelines that you have given to your team that whenever you're selecting, make sure that they are having a good track record? Are they funded to establish that trust? Or if at all they are not funded, are the features of the product, is it aligning to the company's strategies? So is there any metrics or parameters based on which your team is selecting a certain tool, Pankaj?
Yeah. So what happens is if you look at what we are doing, we are more an experimentation innovation team.
Yeah.
At this stage, when we are doing things, we don't put too many guidelines, because if you saddle the innovation people with too many guidelines, then they are not sort of natural, they are not experimenting. So at that stage, we allow them to work with anyone, because what will happen? You learn something, even if, this has happened. We worked with a startup for 9 months and then they shut down. But frankly, we don't look at it as a negative, because in that 9 months, we learned something. and we now know what to do next. Versus we would have felt that, oh, this startup is going to shut down. Should we not work with them? Because they were doing something unique, which they didn't find the market, they didn't find the funding, and they shut down. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from them. So I think at the experimentation stage, we don't put too many guidelines. We say just go figure out, use open source, use startups, use whatever. There's no major guideline. But the moment the POC starts to become successful, and then we have to BOT to the business, there you need solid, this thing. So many times what has happened is, sometimes we have worked with a startup who we felt was not really very sustainable. So we told the business, saying, you know what, we have worked with them. We think there are 2 or 3 things we can do. One, we can look at another alternative who may be, having a similar solution. 2, we also think there is something we can build on our own. So you have to de-risk yourself over time, because in a production environment, you can't afford to have the risk. So like I said, we try to take the risk in this part, but when we go there, we try to mitigate the risk by putting in some more framework in the BOT stage. So the guidelines are more on the BOT side, that if you're going to have a production ready system, then you obviously need to make sure that they can't fail. So that is where some of the guidelines we have created for the businesses. And then businesses also, depending on their own risk appetite and what they want to do, they take the right call. Many a time some businesses have said, you know what, we would rather wait for you guys to do that thing and develop it yourself versus this startup, because we think we don't want to trust it. That's fine. So like I said, experimentation, innovation, no guidelines. Here, a set of guidelines, and guideline really allowing the business to determine how much risk they're willing to take and how to mitigate that.
So can you explain more on this? You explained, from the POC till the BOT, right? So once your team has given a go ahead for a certain product, what it takes for you to champion the product internally? Can you take us through the phase where the multiple decision makers are involved, or you are as a tech evangelist? It's your say that even other verticals are following you. So how it takes from the POC till the BOT? Can you just elaborate on that?
Yeah. I think sometimes how we frame the question is very critical. So many a times the framing, the way you said it was, oh, now we have something, now let's evangelize and let's take it to people. What I have realized is that no one is interested in what you have created and what you're evangelizing. That was your baby.
Interesting.
I think everyone is interested in their business. So I think our framing is not that we have produced something and now you please use it. We try to link it to their business strategy. So like I said, all our team members, they have business stakeholders with whom over time they develop a strategic connect. They do workshop and all of that. So they understand what the business need is. So they are coming from top down or outside in to say, I think this business is having this topic or this issue. I think they can use it. So instead of saying, oh, we have created a nice logistics solution, all of you use it. And by the way, we tried it.
If you can share.
It usually will not work. And I'll tell you why. It's very, very commonsensical, because you have created something for someone for whom it was a priority. So you went through a process to determine, for this company, this is a critical priority right now, and we created it. I think it should be very, very difficult to imagine that everyone else also had the same priority at the same time. It will never happen. So if you create, you as a person, let's say you create a product for someone. Now you go sell it to your neighbors. Why would they buy it? Unless you understand what the neighbors need. So I think that the idea in general, I'm not saying we should not try it. I'm saying generally the idea that since I have created something for one person, 500 other person will also buy it is not necessarily natural, unless you figure out who they are and how you can segment them. So I think because we are not in a B2C environment where there are thousands of people in experimenting, we have a good understanding of what the priorities of business people are. And based on whoever is next in line, so we'll say, okay, this product is done. Then we talk to other people, say, we know who's focused on. We said, I think this other business is probably also going to benefit from this now. Some of the others have other priorities, let them be. Like I took logistics as an example. Maybe business A needs logistics more. Business B needs energy efficiency more, because that is their business priority. So now there's no point in me going to this business to sell them something which they right now don't need. They may need it year after it. So I think the approach we are following is we are creating reusable components, but not trying to sell all of it just because we have created it. We are keeping it available. We are evangelizing and socializing so that everyone knows. But we are using the strategy lever or that filter to say who should need it and when. So the conversation someone will have is, you know what? We have done this in that company. It's working very well. And we had done the strategy workshop with you. We believe that this is something worth evaluating for you. And for someone else, the narrative should be different. So the narrative has to come from their business strategy and their need, and not from our ability to have created something. So I think that's the narrative change that we have brought about.
Okay,
Otherwise,
sure.
and by the way, we have learned the hard way,
Mm.
because earlier people would do something and then keep knocking 100 doors and no one would listen and they would be frustrated.
Yeah.
So then we realized that, why is that happening? So I think the main thing which also led to this framework that I speak about is really keep reflecting and learning from experience. So if
Mm.
you're frustrated, what has led to that frustration and
Mm.
what is that framework or learning that you can create as a reusable component to be
Mm.
used later. So our
Okay.
reusable component on this adoption is, don't just go to people because you have made something.
Mm.
Adoption will happen when they need it, so you have to align their need to what you have, and it has to start from outside in.
Got it, Pankaj. Now, interesting. Now, this is opening up to so many other questions. Uh, let's say, there is a digital transformation happening because everyone is doing this, Pankaj. So, and let's say that, you have, onboarded, good SaaS tool. And, the certain features which they have mentioned, and there are some changes happening because of this digital transformation. So how does the founder react in your experience? If at all you had such situation, how is the founder reacting to it? If you can, share a good experience and not so good experience with the founders, especially when there is internal change in the organization, and how do you manage, you as a COE, how are you managing the internal change, and how, to your experience, how are the founders uh, facing this change?
Yeah. So there are lots of stories. Again, some of these is better not to take name, but I'll tell you what
Yeah, yeah.
happened. So there were a few founders, and I don't know whether there's causation or correlation. They were overseas. In their case, they were not very willing to change anything on their product roadmap because we said so. And we have reflected and we don't know the answer. Is it because they felt that India is a small market and they don't want to do anything for us, or I don't know. But we
Mm,
have had this issue with some of the overseas companies that were startups that we have engaged. They were unwilling, and in one or two cases we had to drop them. We said, these guys have a very different roadmap. We want to do something else. So over time we either use some open source components or some other Indian company and so forth. I think in the Indian company scenario, founders are, I think, far more amenable, because many of them also feel that if a group like ours
mm,
has this need,
mm,
maybe we represent a need for a rest of the economy as well.
mm.
So we have found the Indian founders far more receptive to ideas from
Okay.
us, because
Okay.
they think in some ways, if you look at our group, it sort of is a microcosm of the Indian economy.
Mm.
And in many ways, I say that it reflects the larger need of the market. So it's a good place to also test out your ideas. And
Sure.
if we have a need, you can check whether others may have it also.
Mm.
So we have found the Indian founders to be more receptive than the
Oh,
overseas one. Like I said,
that's an
it is just
interesting.
few data points, so I can't say for sure.
Sure, sure,
But
sure.
this is what we have seen.
So what happened in that, Pankaj, to my understanding, is they gave certain features initially, and they were very strict to the roadmap, and they
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
adhere to
they
your.
didn't want to change anything, and we were
So,
very clear that we wanted something else. So over a
so
period of time, we left that relationship. And
okay.
interesting, you know what? I think the other thing that we learned, at least in one case, we actually found a very good open source solution that our team was experimenting on. So we also have a bit of a innovation streak in our
R&D.
team, and we keep doing experiments on our own.
Hmm.
Let's say even if we have a good startup which is working in a space, but we also keep experimenting.
Hmm.
So there was a company in the area of optimization. They had done a really good job, and when we disengaged with them, our people had come up with their own open source solution, which was reasonably okay for the need that we had.
For the need,
So,
huh?
so many a time we have also found that actually some of the founders unwilling
Hmm.
to listen to us was a blessing in disguise, because it made us innovate, and we came up with something
Hmm.
which is now very low cost and the IP is entirely ours. So in the area of innovation, you can't say what is good or bad.
Hmm.
They listening to
Absolutely.
you is good and they not listening to you is bad would be the common notion in the normal case.
Hmm.
I would say maybe some of them listening to us are making us intellectually lazy to not experiment. So I can argue either way. So I'm saying we
Hmm.
have to kind of just hold both
Balance.
these ideas parallelly together and not believe that one is better than the other.
Yeah, absolutely, Pankaj. Thanks for sharing that. Now, the next thing, if you can give a, this is out of curiosity, how many SaaS tools are you evaluating in a quarter? It's not just your purchasing, but how many are you evaluating internally when you're experimenting at your COE level? And also you're kind of, passing on to, let's say, Hindalco or Ultratech or the fashion retail. So on an average, if you could share the number.
Yeah, I think most people in my team will not even relate to this question, because in our mind
Mhm.
we are trying to solve business problems,
Mhm.
and in solving business problems we are evaluating many things at different points in time. So
Okay.
the idea that what I did just now was a SaaS tool
Hmm.
may or may not occur to them. because we are solving a problem, and someone will say, there is this company or there is this tool, why don't you evaluate, and things like that. So I think the
I mean,
notion of evaluating SaaS tool is not a notion which will be common in our
then
team.
let
So
me go. Like, how
yeah,
many are you finalizing, or how many are getting in the POC stage?
hard to say. I think the numbers will not be very large, because if you
Okay.
think about the topics on which we are working,
Hmm.
optimization or regression, I mean, we are talking
Data
about
FinOps.
mostly data related tool, right? So unlike, let's say, an IT team,
Hmm.
which has a far bigger, landscape for evaluating tools,
Hmm.
this question may be valid for them.
Okay.
For our team, the business problem is the topmost thing that people are thinking about. They're not thinking tools. They're just thinking, can I solve this problem?
Okay.
Can adoption happen? So like I said, if you look at my 10 boxes, the tool is, just a small element of this whole thing. And in
Hmm.
many cases, we have found some nice partners. In fact, we don't even look at it as a tool, because in most of these cases, these are startups who are evolving that product as we go along. So it's a evolutionary product, and they are all data science products, so to say. So
Sure.
I think we are just evaluating lots of startups,
Okay.
not so much SaaS tools, because the moment you say tool, it is something like a shrink wrap product. We are not in the game of buying shrink wrap products. As an innovation
Got it.
team, our job is to look at early access to innovation,
Hmm.
and tool is, in my mind, something which is already established and stable. So we would not want to buy any tool, because tool is a stable product. That is
Hmm.
not necessarily something which is relevant for an innovation team. That is probably something which is relevant for a BOT team, the business team, because tool is a stable product that they will do.
Hmm.
We are not in the business of tools. Our job is to create data science products which can be used to drive innovation. The moment something becomes a tool, it's not of interest to us, because it has been stabilized and it has been commoditized.
Sure. But so your involvement is not even in the handholding of the tool. If, for example, if you have used any SaaS internally, which is, let's say, into data FinOps, and you are passing it on to retail, let's say. So to what extent are you doing the knowledge transfer? I
Yeah.
mean, are
So I
you
think we are usually transferring a POC or a solution to them.
okay?
So if you think about the solution transfer of BOT, it's also, I mean, you can again use the 10 boxes to say, what do we transfer? We transfer a bit of data science, a bit of data
Okay.
engineering, a bit of data architecture,
Hmm.
a bit of talent, a bit of funding, a bit of ecosystem, a bit of adoption, a bit of strategy, whatever, right? So if you
Hmm.
think of the BOT in that 10 box framework,
Hmm.
we are transferring that. So within that, let's say we had an ecosystem partner. Let's say we did something in the fashion industry,
Hmm.
and there was a very cool company which was automating design using Gen AI. So when that is getting transferred to them, that startup company and the knowledge thereof also gets transferred to the business, along with the other paraphernalia that we have created within. So I think, like I
Sure.
said, the BOT is the whole transfer of all kinds of knowledge, from technical to change management to whatever, and
Hmm.
so that they can then scale it to other businesses and then continue to sustain it in their own business. So that startup company would then have a relationship with that
Hmm.
company, because it is part of the larger solution that we provided.
So shifting the gears, Pankaj, when it comes to the system integrators, right? I'm sure they are helping you with the AWS and the Databricks and Snowflake. Now, how do you evaluate a system integrator before onboarding them? Are there any metrics like how you're evaluating the SaaS? How are you evaluating the system integrators? And how to what extent are you having the relation with them? Are they also recommending you any tools? In the journey of installing it, they recommended, why don't you use this SaaS? So is this scenario happening?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there are two places where we are getting inputs from the external ecosystem. One is
Sure.
really the technical layer that you allude to, how do you do the data engineering right, and some of those types of things. And then there's the functional layer.
Hmm.
How do you solve logistics, or how do you solve marketing, or how do you solve energy, or things like that, right? So I think
Hmm.
there are two layers. I think the usually some of these system integrators are playing in the bottom layer,
Okay.
and there's something or the other happening all the time. But I would say that that's not where the bigger value or the bang for the buck for our team happens. For
Sure.
us, the bigger value for the bucks happens on the functional layer.
Hmm.
Do this startup have a really good handle on how to solve logistics in a creative manner? Do they have connection with the digital public infrastructure? They're able to suck in data from other places and create a meaningful solution. So I think our value add to our stakeholders in terms of outcome is really on data, alternate data, utilizing them to take better decisions.
Hmm.
Clearly, to manage it very well, the data engineering and the data architecture layer has to be very well architected.
Sure.
But that is an area which doesn't sort of create a big innovative edge for us. I would
Okay.
say again, it's a necessary, but not a sufficient condition for innovation from our perspective. So
Sure.
we do put effort over there, but I would say a larger part of the effort is on the other part,
Okay.
which is the function. What else is happening there? What new can be done? So that's the way, at least so far, the evolution of our team. I wouldn't say this is the way to do it, but I'm just reflecting on your question to say what has happened so far. So far, the focus has a lot more been on the business function to say what innovating thing can we do in this field. And clearly, to support that, you have to have a good, innovative and efficient infrastructure to make it happen. But innovation over here has been, like I said, necessary but not sufficient to create better outcome there, because that is where I think the functional knowledge kicks in.
You have pointed a very interesting point, thing, Pankaj. Now, this is a common questions that we keep getting from our founders, that how do we approach you as a group CDO? Because how do we know that you are the key decision maker, if at all? Because yesterday I did this exercise. I just googled, CDO, group CDO, Aditya Birla, and I'm getting like more than 20 personas, and this is where we are getting lost. Now, just now you mentioned it is the IT who is taking the call rather than the COE. So how do one founder navigate this org structure, Pankaj?
Yeah.
If you can throw some
Yeah,
light
no,
on
no.
it.
So I think it's a good question to say, if you are somewhere outside and you're looking at the market of CDOs, CIOs, IT people in large companies, what should the approach of an outside person be, is the question you're asking. And it's a great question. So first of all, just the nomenclature. There are all kinds of nomenclature in the industry. There's CDO, there's CIO, there's CDIO, there is, what have you, right? So I think nomenclatures are useful, but again, they don't necessarily tell you what those people are, responsible
Exactly.
for. So I see, I think the main thing that anyone should be interested in is saying what is the responsibility of the role,
Okay.
So like I said, and how someone has defined it. So in my case, I have defined our team's role, which is a central team, as an evangelist, as an innovation team, to help create data culture. The CDOs or CIOs in group companies, their role will be very different. They have to run, they have to enhance the business value, and so on and so forth, right? So their purchase need, their engagement with business will be different. So I think it's instructive to know what does that role mean in that context. And
Okay.
secondly, what is the individual style is, because there are enough people who always believe that I can do it all on my own. There's some others who believe that everything can be done by someone else, and I have seen both types of examples. And there's, of course, there are people who will say, okay, some things have to be done on. So I think the openness of those individuals to engage people from the outside is also an important factor, because if there's someone, and we have seen this a lot in the startup ecosystem, and I know friends of mine who were outside trying to quote unquote sell to them, they always felt over a period of time that these people felt that we could do anything in technology on our own. Why would we want to hire someone else? So they would sometimes
Very
listen to
true.
them, not do something at first, sometimes listen to them and copy it and nothing like that, right? So I think based on that, I would think the two things need to be done is, what does this role mean in that context? Like I said, in my case, my role is this, the CDO's role is something else. And secondly, what is the individual holding that role have the thought process or the management style to deal with the ecosystem? Some people will say, and I know people who would say, we only use vendors to run the business stuff. Some others say, you know what, we actually leverage outside people to do innovative stuff. And some could do both. So again, different people are different, and we all have seen that. So I would think that if very quickly someone can assess what does that role entail, what is the scope of that role, and what is the management style of the person who's holding that role, I
Okay.
think the combination of that will probably lead to the answer.
Sure. Is there any one, quick LinkedIn activity that you can tell to our audience? I mean, how can they, a two-step process, how to qualify that, if he's the right decision maker?
Very hard to say. I have to say I'm not active on LinkedIn at all. I
Okay.
don't browse it. I don't post it. So I'm not a good person to advise anyone on LinkedIn influence. And sometimes in LinkedIn also is, at least I would feel that, or any other social media, is not easily a good place to begin.
Okay.
Because you don't know what is the intent of the post that someone is doing. Some people are doing self-promotion posts, some people are doing educational posts, reflection posts, all of those types of posts. So just by reading a post of an individual that I don't know, it's hard for me to judge who they are, what they want, what can I do with them. So
Okay.
I don't know myself, and which is the reason I'm not very active on LinkedIn to say that what to do with that. I would think that the ideal way would be to find personal connection in whichever one can, and
Okay.
find out about those individuals and try to meet them informally if possible, and so on and so forth.
Okay, sure. That's helpful. I don't think that is going to be possible most of the times, but yeah, I think that's helpful, Pankaj. Now, can you share, one good case study, or you may not name the company as such, but in which you really had a good experience, Pankaj, from end to end. How long did it go? And
So interestingly, this case study is of a smallish company in one of our group companies, which was already doing something for that company.
mm,
And when we came in, they started to do some amount of data work
mm,
because they were already there, and the company said, okay, they will be also partnering in this endeavor what you're doing.
mm,
Over time, over the last few years, it has been such that that company has been very eager to pick on new types of work, modify their own thought process into doing new things which they were not doing in the earlier part. So, in some senses, at least, and I haven't spoken to the founder, but it appears to them that they were hungry to expand their, the whatever they were doing to include new things that we were also bringing to the table. So, because we were a new function and we brought
mm.
some new ideas related to
And
data.
this was India based, sorry
Yeah,
to.
yeah, all database, everything in
Okay.
database.
Mm,
So they have now developed those data skills.
mm,
So now we are able to BOT a bunch of data work to them,
mm.
and they were not really a strong data company to start with. So
Okay.
I think the lesson that I have learned here is that many of those companies out there
Mm,
are very interested in progressing, improving, adding new skills to the table.
mm,
So initially, our team's thinking was that we have to get some new companies who
mm,
are cool and new, and they will do stuff,
mm,
and the older companies which are already there may
mm,
not be very useful. Now
mm,
I think we have changed our mind to say there may be a bunch of smallish companies working with our group companies, maybe in related work, not
mm,
necessarily data,
mm,
but if the founders or those companies have the ambition
mm,
to add on,
mm,
even better,
mm.
because some of these companies have probably already cleared the infrastructure and the application understanding of our
The
group or
basics,
that
huh?
company.
Mm,
So if you already know two layers in
mm,
our group,
mm,
and you're ambitious to add two other layers,
mm.
why would we not deal with you? Why would I want to
Great.
bring a totally new company which may or may not have all things being equal?
Mm, mm,
So I think this is a change on our side to learn that let's not ignore
mm.
older relationships.
Okay.
Look at them, try
Mm,
to encourage them to try new things, and if they are
mm,
willing to do that, grow them
mm.
versus try to bring new vendors
No,
in.
this is really helpful, Pankaj. Now, last question, second last question. Any red flags, for the SaaS founders who are approaching to you? And I mean, so far, I mean,
I would think not a red flag, but I would say that start to think like a business.
mm,
I think we have for a long while looked at IT or technology as a commodity. That I have this product, please buy it.
mm,
I think people are today buying business impact, and
mm,
if you are able to tie up whatever you have to the business impact, then it's a much better buy.
mm,
But the only way you can do that is you will have to understand the business of the
mm,
stakeholders and be able to connect your tool to that. So to some extent, I would actually say that they
mm.
can also use the 3W framework that I articulated to say,
Sure.
understand their business, understand their talent, understand their everything,
Mm,
and try to position your tool in
mm,
the larger context of the business rather than saying, I have it, do you want to use it?
mm,
Because many a time people don't know when and
mm.
why and how they should use it. So I think developing a narrative which is far more holistic,
Oh,
starting
sure.
from an overall business. So let's say if the conversation can be, let's say
Mm,
I'm a SaaS founder,
yeah.
I'm having a conversation with a stakeholder,
Mm,
and I tell them, and this is what we tell our folks to do in the
mm,
talking.
mm,
I've been reading your annual report, looking at the news, looking at research reports. Looks like this is what you guys have been doing. So have a conversation on business. I think this is where it is headed. This is what
Basic
your competition doing.
groundwork and
So
home.
you kind of engage the leader
Mm,
to say that I understand your business and I understand what is going on.
mm,
Once you've done that, then you say, I think as you go forward based on competition, I think these are the things that you might be thinking about.
mm.
And they say yes to
This is
something.
how I can help
By the
you.
way, to do this, I think we have tried something which is well there. Would you want to try? So I'm just saying, I mean, it sounds very commonsensical when I say it, but if you
No.
think about it, that's how people take decisions. That here is my journey.
Mm,
Here is a person who understands my journey.
mm,
He has also got some ideas. She has also got some ideas on where that journey can be,
mm,
and I can be a partner in helping you further your journey.
mm.
I think that's the narrative I would say, and many a times it's not as hard as it appears to be.
No, absolutely.
It's just that we have also found in our own team that a lot of people we have hired are with the engineering background, so they
Mm,
know the ways of doing very well.
mm,
So the way I also present this framework of the 3W is to say at the top is humanities, which is business and strategy.
mm,
In the middle is commerce, it should make money. And the bottom is science or technology. So you
mm,
guys cannot just be a science person. You got to add commerce and humanities because in our education system we kind of trifecta, we break people into these three, but we all know that the three things have to work together in any
Together.
business. So I'm kind of telling our people that you all have to be full stack human beings. Just a full stack developer is not going to be good enough, because unless you can connect what you're doing to the business and be able to sustain it, which will be focused on the commerce of that activity, then only it can make sense.
No, that's helpful, Pankaj. Last question, you're so active. Just could you share your morning routine and how do you keep yourself, mentally strong and physically strong? If you can throw some light on your everyday habits that keeps you charged every day.
Yeah, so I think I use the same framework principle for my life also, that there's
Sure.
things that all sort of automated. So the life is very predictable for me all 7 days of the week.
Okay.
So 5 days of the week, typically I try to get 8 hours of sleep, 10:30 to 6:30, an hour or so of walk or run in the morning, going to office, coming back, some amount of time spent with the kids and family, and some OTT or something. So those are the 5 days of the week. Last 2 days, because I'm a marathon runner, Saturday is the day for a long run. So we have a large group of people. We meet
Okay.
near Kaban Park, do a long run. So earlier I used to just run once a week, 30 kilometers on Saturday. But COVID made me start to run every day of the week. So the long run has become sometimes 20 or less. But I do try to do a few 30s before the marathon happens. So we have a group called Bhukam, which stands for
Okay.
six marathons: Bangalore, Hyderabad, Ultra, Kaveri, Mumbai, Pondicherry.
Okay.
And we do a conversation that we talk and run and we learn from each other. So the long
Okay.
run is all about chatting. So we are not stretching ourselves and all of that. So it's a fun group. We enjoy each other's companies, running, learning from each other, eating together and stuff like that. So that's the weekend routine. I also play badminton in the evening once in a while, do cycling. So I'm a bit of an outdoor person who likes to go out, and I have therefore lots of different communities: badminton, cycling,
Sure.
running, and
Anything
so.
in the areas of meditation? Do you follow meditation? Or running is your
To me, all
meditation?
of these are meditation. To me, meditation is
Okay.
something that gives you peace of mind.
Sure.
I mean, if you ask me, even this conversation is meditative. I am quite at peace with myself.
That's
So I
that's
do
wonderful.
not
Yeah.
relate to the idea of meditation in the Himalayas or Vipassana. I'm sure it works for some people. For me, every minute is a meditation.
No, absolutely, Pankaj. Thank you so much. And it's pleasure talking to you. And one last advice to the youngsters or the SaaS founders out there, if at all, you would like to share, Pankaj.
Yeah. I think the only advice I have is that I think our education system and sometimes the corporate systems makes us believe in things in a certain way, and sometimes we forget to just use common sense. So I tell my kids also that you were so inquisitive, you were so had so much of common sense before you went to school and college, and
Okay.
now both of them are working, by the way. So I think while you have learnt a bunch of things in terms of subjects or departments, um, sometimes people become siloed in terms of, I'm a computer scientist, I'm a marketing person. I'm saying that cannot be your identity. That's just one skill that you happen to have. So I think just getting out of that silo, which was imparted to you because of a college degree or a role in a business, just come out and just retain your common sense that this is how the world works. It has always worked that way. It will continue to work
Okay.
that way because the same human beings, they're all motivated by similar stuff. So if you look at the humans, they haven't really changed the way they work. They have the same human qualities that they've always had. So if we focus on things like that and use some of those other things that we have as an add-on and not just the end all and be all of it, I think life will be far more simpler. I think does appear like a big sort of statement, but I do think that just zoom out and look at those identities as one part of your life and self, and think of work and life as one continuum where anything that you learn in one can be applied in another. I look at product management, which I learned in office, on myself. I'm a product. My family is a product. How do I keep refining my family and my own self? Similarly, if there are people in my family that I deal with, their difficult conversation, can I use the same thing in office to say, how do you deal with such people in the office? So I think if we look at all of these things in an integrated whole and use the distinction that were created by school or office as just one way to understand the thing and not to say that's all to it, I think that's all I would
Yeah, I
say.
think I have heard your in one of the podcasts. I've seen you been mentioning that, like how you're treating your boss and how are you taking the help from your team members. Feel free, especially to the the young women out there who are new moms, how you should be taking the help from your. I think I've seen that before. Well said, Pankaj. Thank you so much, and looking forward to host you more in the upcoming podcast series.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. Thank you.